Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into the story of Monaco. You know, that tiny place on the French Riviera.
hmm Second smallest country in the world, but it's history. It's huge. It's
Yeah,
absolutely fascinating.
it really is. And our guide for this is Associate Professor Dr. Afisava Chayapolfat Sirivathanoarvacharas, A Brief History of Monaco.
Yeah, it's a great academic overview, perfect for us to kind of dig into the key moments, the legacies, of this pretty remarkable principality.
So our mission for you listening is to get past those, well, glossy postcard images and really understand Monaco's journey. We're talking centuries here.
Everything from the very first people who lived there
Right.
to the Grimaldis who've been there forever, it seems.
Oh, feels like it.
And how this tiny spot became the global hub it is now. You'll hear some surprising stuff, I think.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The sheer age of human presence there is kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. I mean, we're talking archaeological evidence from the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic periods. It just shows people have been drawn to this exact spot for an incredibly long time.
Wow. And finding that actual 7th century BC burial, that really makes it concrete, doesn't it? Not just passing through.
Exactly. And you also had the influence of those early Mediterranean cultures, like the Phoenicians. They left a necropolis.
Great.
And even later, you see Greek cultural traces, bits of language, songs, oral traditions. They sort of lingered.
So the Ligurians then, they were pre-Indo-European farmers, fishermen, and into gaming. That's an interesting mix.
Huh. Yeah, seems so. They were known for being pretty resourceful and independent.
Right.
And they built these fortified settlements on hills, castles they're called. Might go back to 600 BC, maybe even earlier. There's even some pottery suggesting Greek links around the time Marseille was founded.
So is it possible that today's Monegasques are, descended partly from them, mixed in with everyone who came later?
It's very likely part of that complex heritage, yes. It's a deep well of history.
And the geography itself, beyond just being beautiful, it must have been crucial.
Oh, absolutely. Being right there on the Mediterranean, always a factor, especially, in the 19th century when it suddenly became the place to be.
Right, that fashionable Riviera spot.
Picture that promenade, the grand hotels, pulling in Europe's elite, and then at night, transforming again. Artists, nightlife.
And it's not just the coast, is it? That steep hinterland rising up behind. It creates this amazing contrast. Modern luxury smashed right up against old Monacoville, the medieval bit.
Exactly. History is literally carved into the landscape there. You've got Monte Carlo sort of nestled between the harbors, even a surfing spot, which is maybe surprising.
Huh.
And the whole country is this tiny, irregular triangle, less than 2 square kilometers, mountains basically tumbling into the sea. It's visually stunning.
Okay, let's shift to the name everyone knows, Grimaldi. Over 7 centuries ruling. That's just, wow, where did they come from?
Well, they were originally a noble house from that area, Monaco itself. You can trace roots back, maybe influences from the Obertengi Ligurian tribe way back in the 4th or 5th century AD.
Okay.
But the big moment really is 1162. That's when they first got a foothold on what we now call the Rock of Monaco.
And then the famous story, 1297, Francois Grimaldi dressed as a monk.
Ha! Yes, the classic tale, sneaking into the fortress. It's quite the dramatic start for, 800 years of sovereignty gained by a trick, essentially.
Yeah, it's legendary, but holding on to it wasn't easy, I gather.
Not at all. Constant battles, rivals trying to take the rock back. Formal recognition only came later. Charles de Grimaldi got a charter in 1331.
Right.
And even then, the family spent generations really working to solidify that position, getting recognition from popes, other powers.
And it seems they were strategic, too, not just fighting, buying succession rights and things like that.
Exactly. They played the long game. There were times they were kicked out, had to leave the rock, but they'd find ways back, make alliances, deals with the papacy. The Reformed Edict of St. John in the 15th century was another key step in cementing their legal rule.
What about those early leaders? Francesco, the first actual prince, was he liked?
Seems he was popular locally, yeah. But the early Grimaldi state was really hemmed in by rivals. Their power was basically just Monaco itself at first.
Yeah, okay.
Carlo managed to expand things a bit later. But then under Giovanni II's sons, alliances shifted. They lost territory again. Ended up as just the barony of Monaco for a while. Power really ebbed and flowed.
So it was a long, bumpy road to becoming the principality we know. Let's quickly recap those key steps. Genoese fort in 1215, Prince of Savoy's siege.
Right, and that siege treaty in 1217 is the first time Monaco actually appears in writing officially.
Interesting.
But control kept changing hands. Boccanera seized it. It fell under Ventimiglia's jurisdiction. The name itself, Monaco, probably comes from the Latin monicus, maybe meaning alone, referring to the rock.
And Charles I, back in 1297, that adds a bit of, well, swashbuckling flair.
It really shows you how volatile things were, the methods people used,
Yeah.
then more ups and downs. Hereditary rule finally established in 1421. Then the French took over for a bit in the 17th century.
Right before the Grimaldis got it back.
Exactly. And secularization in 1660 was another big shift, defining their governance, though French influence was, always sort of there in the background.
Okay, Middle Ages, feudalism.
Yeah.
Giovanni Grimaldi as the first lord. That whole system of lords and vassals.
Pretty much the standard setup for the time. The feudal contract, the lord offers protection, the vassal gives loyalty, service, respects property, sealed with an oath of homage. The Duke of Ventimiglia was a major player regionally in that system.
Even Charlemagne's empire reached Monaco, conquered by the county of Ventimiglia.
Yep. Seems the Grimaldis were constantly having to reassert themselves. There's a curious story about the Lord of Ventimiglia visiting. It's supposedly a happy springtime party hosted by Monaco's lord, but it turns sour. There's betrayal. The visitor ends up trapped in the fortress. It's a little snapshot of the politics back then.
Intrigue. And the Genoese, their influence must have been huge too, given the location. Monaicos alone, that name really fits the rock.
It does.
Yeah.
Genoa and Pisa were battling for sea control, and Genoa built fortifications there, which basically made Monaco a Genoese vassal state for a time, reliant on the surrounding area.
Which brings us back again to 1297, the Grimaldi takeover during those Gulf and Ghibelline Wars. It sounds like their fortunes were constantly shifting.
Totally. One minute they're dukes or princes, the next they could be prisoners. And when Charles III has died and his young son Charles II took over, French influence grew stronger. There was even a plan for Monaco to revert to France if the Grimaldi line died out.
Wow, that really highlights how fragile their hold was sometimes. So, moving into the Renaissance, culturally, Monaco was a bit of a backwater initially.
Yeah, the document suggests maybe a few artists passed through, but nothing really stuck. Serious art cultivation, especially music, seems to start later, maybe around 1639, with music theorists showing up.
Okay.
And then you start seeing actual Monegasque musicians, like Andrea Perotti, composed comic operas, though, sadly, most of his stuff is lost.
Shame. And they had their own local instrument, the harmonica or moneg.
Yeah, these little local details are great, aren't they? There's also folk music, some pieces reflecting recent history, ties to France. Religious music, too, motets, masses, some for Charles III.
So the real cultural blossoming, it sounds like, kicked off after 1860, once things with France were more settled?
Seems that way. Naturalist painters, writers started coming. And lots of talented musicians lived there then, even if their biographers didn't always notice. Concerts in the prince's offices, palace chapel organists. The scene was growing.
And architecture, too. St. Nicholas Cathedral, built over the 16th, 17th centuries, that's a major statement.
Huge project. White stone, Romanesque base. You can see its long history in the mix of styles inside, the chapels, marble, gilding.
I mean, theater's starting to pop up. Prince Louis Sir had one in the 17th century. But the Casino de Paris Opera House, late 19th century, commissioned by Charles III, that must have been something else.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A symbol of Monaco's rising status. The description sounds incredibly lavish. Alabaster, bronze, gold everywhere, pure Belle Epoque grandeur.
Italian culture seems to have had a really big impact, too, especially with merchants and bankers arriving.
Yes, escaping plague in Italy, apparently. Charles II even wanted to be like the Doge of Genoa. The Genoese helped rebuild agriculture, too.
But it went deeper than just economics, right? Fashion, luxury goods, cuisine, even needing legal minds for fashion advice.
Huh. It shows how seriously they took refinement. Operas were huge. Italian masters taught language, court life anecdotes, artists like Curvilines. The Italian influence was really woven into the fabric of Monaco's elite society then.
Okay, 19th century. Big changes. Modernization under Prince Florestan I.
Yeah, moving away from just being a fishing village, starting to focus on tourism. Haute cuisine develops. Suddenly there's demand for fish. First restaurant opens in 1840. Small steps, but significant.
And then Monte Carlo. Prince Charles II using gambling wealth to build the Casino and Hôtel de Paris. That feels pivotal.
Absolutely massive. Clever marketing, and suddenly Monte Carlo means gambling.
Yeah.
Wealthy Europeans flock in, GDP shoots up. It's a real shift towards new money, maybe a more liberated social scene, too.
Just like they deliberately crafted this image, right? From a quiet spot to this glittering paradise, reflecting Europe's own changing hierarchies.
Exactly. Prince Charles III had this dream of a glamorous showplace. And the story of how the casino actually came about, kind of a chance encounter.
Really?
Yeah. The document also mentions earlier financial woes, like Honore VI gambling away his inheritance, eventually having to sell the casino rights. It wasn't all smooth sailing financially.
And building around the casino from 1863, it wasn't instant success. Storms, bad harvests, taxes.
No, they had setbacks, which led to that smart move of pushing winter gambling, trying to draw crowds when it was usually dead, even brought in French police to manage things.
So picturing Monaco then, arid rocks, nice breezes. You had the palace in the old town, Monacoville, and then this new, glitzy Monte Carlo emerging.
Exactly, with Port Hercule connecting it all. Early tourism efforts, like summer trains from Paris, apparently just broke even at first. It was really doubling down on winter gambling, simplifying the games that made it take off.
Then the 20th century, world wars, huge impact everywhere. How did WWI affect Monaco?
Well, even being neutral, losing that gambling income was a massive risk for a place so dependent on the casino and hotels. And French influence grew stronger. They even got legal power over the prince's authority and gambling revenues. Monaco basically had to submit, leading to that 1918 treaty with France.
And World War II sounds even more direct, overrun by pro-fascist forces, an escape route.
Yeah, a really turbulent time. Prince Louis II actually fought for the Allies, which helped get Monaco's sovereignty recognized after liberation. But before that, renewed French control, then the German invasion in '43, dismantling borders, sacking police.
Wow.
They had partial autonomy under German military rule for a bit, but it was chaotic. Activists, intellectuals fled into exile. It's pretty remarkable the monarchy survived it all, really.
Looking closer at WWI, that initial panic across Europe in 1914 must have felt very close in Monaco, given its ties to France.
Absolutely. And Monaco already had a history of instability, bankrupt rulers, revolutions. Prince Louis II suspending the Constitution in 1911 didn't exactly help confidence.
Right.
Seeing Monte Carlo turned into military fortifications, newspapers vanishing, that must have hit hard. Even the pre-war vices kind of faded away in the face of real economic hardship.
WWII sounds incredibly complex. Strategic location becomes a huge liability.
Totally. France falls in 1940, Monaco's cut off. The prince tries to appease the Axis, stay neutral under Italian occupation, but Italy keeps intervening more and more. That public appeal for Jewish residents, a very difficult moment.
And the fact that Monaco had been a sanctuary, but then the prince rejects the appeal, the casino closes, deportations happen.
Yes, it's a dark chapter. Restrictions on Jewish immigration increased. There was clearly internal division, mistrust about neutrality, secret police activity, a very tense atmosphere.
Okay, post-war. Recovery. Prince Rainier III takes over. His tax proposal to France in '61 causes friction.
Big time. France basically said no way, given Monaco's tax haven status. Strained relations for a while, that famous story about Madame Pelagie, Grace Kelly, and Rainier. A fascinating glimpse into the personal side, though maybe not hugely impactful politically.
Right, Princess Grace became more private after that.
And Monaco started modernizing its infrastructure, communication systems after 1965, bringing in Parisian expertise.
And political reforms happened too, adapting again. The 1962 Constitution sounds key.
Very key. It unified the laws, set up institutions, enshrined sovereignty, and importantly, ended that long-running customs dispute with France. Prince Albert's earlier 1911 Constitution project had already laid some groundwork for rights and freedoms, alongside defining the prince's powers.
Economically, the 60s were transformative. That Fontenay land reclamation project.
Huge. Driven by a desire for jobs, growth, maybe some impatience with just relying on the casino, industrial growth was tricky with the terrain.
Sure.
But pharmaceuticals found a niche. New rules to attract foreign retail, urban planning for areas like La Condamine, shifting towards cooperative apartments, trying to diversify.
So fast forward to the 21st century. Monaco's still navigating change. Prince Albert II balancing royal life, family, and this big focus on the environment.
Yes, very much so. Taking over his mother's role with the orchestra, trying to give his kids a normal-ish life, but also really pushing his father's environmental passion. It seems central to his reign.
And Monaco today, still that image of glamour, yachts, high life, but maybe with growing environmental awareness.
That's the tension, isn't it? The incredible wealth versus visible climate impacts, like drought affecting the gardens. Prince Albert II's accession in 2005 also brought constitutional reforms, though maybe not widely noticed at first amidst the celebration.
Culturally, economically, trends towards modernization, maybe more public consultations started under Rainier III.
Some steps, yeah. Broadening participation a bit, though political apathy seems to be a factor too. The casino lost its monopoly. Environmental consciousness definitely increased after Rainier's death in 2005, but the royal house is still dominant. Real estate and casino speculation remain major forces.
Its international role is fascinating for such a small place. That 1911 constitution was partly a deal with France.
Seems like it. A compromise after losing territory, becoming a protectorate. The treaty limited the prince's power somewhat. There were critiques even back then about relying so heavily on gambling. Those later Roosevelt-Lee talks, the British saying, treat Monaco as unique. It highlights its unusual status.
And the Franco-Monegasque Convention trying to manage the gambling, but also questions about Monaco's other diplomatic ties, military stuff.
Right. It's always been a delicate balancing act. But Monaco consistently sought a bigger international role, joining organizations early on, like for meteorology in 1888.
So joining the UN, WHO, UNESCO, that was a deliberate strategy.
Absolutely. For visibility, recognition as a sovereign state. They were a bit hesitant about the UN initially, but then joined relatively early in 1993. And they're active participants in many specialized agencies now.
Diplomatically, it's this tiny strip caught between Italy and France.
Basically, yeah. A thin strip of finely tuned diplomacy, as the source puts it, always under the watchful eye of Paris and Rome. It's not just serene landscapes, it's complex European politics.
Tourism and culture, still huge, obviously, attracting visitors for centuries.
Definitely. All those famous events, landmarks. For the world's second smallest country, it packs a punch. And that history is just everywhere you look. The Prince's Palace, the Garnier Opera House, Port Hercule, the casino. Iconic.
And the events calendar. Gastronomy Festival, Circus Festival, Christmas Village, and of course, the Grand Prix.
The Grand Prix, Red Cross Ball, Jazz Festival, Monte Carlo Masters. It's nonstop. These landmarks, like the 800-year-old palace or the Belle Epoque Casino, they're not just buildings, they're living history. And the events keep it vibrant.
Looking ahead then, Monaco's got its image, but faces global challenges, economy, climate change.
Right. That Monaco 2025 plan for sustainability is ambitious. A sustainable economy, recycling, renewables, cutting emissions, local food.
It sounds good, but is there skepticism, given the luxury focus?
There is. But you could argue its small size and density make sustainability even more crucial. They're pushing initiatives, international cooperation.
But challenges remain. Balancing growth, like land reclamation, with conservation. Climate security.
Huge challenges. Land reclamation itself raises big questions. Environmental impact, energy use, and Monaco is inherently vulnerable to climate change.
And just keeping that unique charm, right? Avoiding becoming just another generic city of glass towers.
That's a real risk. Preserving the old world city feel while modernizing. It's a tricky balance to strike.
So for you listening, let's pull this all together. Monaco, it's clearly so much more than just a casino and a racetrack.
Absolutely. Its history is incredibly rich, full of these remarkable twists and turns.
You've got those ancient roots, the Grimaldis, holding on for centuries, that strategic geography shaping everything.
Its cultural evolution, how it modernized, survived wars, and now its focus on sustainability.
We saw how it shifted to attract the wealthy after 1860, how people adapted to that luxury.
The criticisms the Grimaldis faced, the huge impact of the Grand Prix, the clash between old-timers and new money.
The railways connecting it, financiers moving in, building those grand hotels.
All that wealth from Casino Square, the shift from elite focus to broader tourism, the problems with corruption and crime related to gambling.
And how the state eventually managed to stabilize things. It's just constant adaptation, isn't it?
It really is. A story of ancient foundations meeting modern pressures, all guided by this one family in this unique spot.
It's genuinely a unique global story packed into a tiny space. So a final thought for you to chew on. Monaco has this long history of adapting, often dramatically. How do you think its blend of tradition and innovation will shape its future in our fast-changing world?
Or maybe think about its reliance on tourism and finance. What are the biggest long-term risks, but also the opportunities for a state with its specific character and size?
Something to mull over. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive, and maybe it inspires you to explore more. Thanks for joining us.